One of the important topics which is on the world agenda is the crisis between Russia and Ukraine. Now I have a special guest, the Foreign Minister, His Excellency of Ukraine, Dmytro Kuleba, will be with us today. First of all, thank you very much for joining us to our special program. It's been an honor to see you in Turkey. And I would like to start first, what do you think about Turkey? You've been attending to the Antalya Diplomacy Forum 2021. What's your thoughts about this?
I have only good thoughts about Turkey. My thoughts vary from good to excellent. There is not a single bad thought about this beautiful country and a very friendly country to Ukraine. Ukraine and Turkey have special bonds, special connection, if I may, between our people, between our leaders, and I see a very bright future for this relationship.
Okay, let me start with my first concrete question. So the relationship between Ukraine and Turkey is not only good for bilateral cooperation, but the region and the relationship between Ukraine and Turkey is at the best. What kind of roadmap you are thinking to strengthen the relationship?
Yesterday, we sat down with my colleague and good friend, Mevlut Çavuşoğlu, for a short bilateral. And he told me, Dmytro, it is such a pleasure to admit that we have no problems to discuss. And I think that this certifies the quality of relationship between Kyiv and Ankara, that we are only discussing joint projects, joint undertaking, and joint efforts, while the level of trust and understanding between us reached the level when we can easily solve even the most difficult problems and issues. We have Ukraine's relations with Turkey are probably the most dynamic compared to relations with other countries. The number of formats which exist between us, the number of contacts between our leaders, the quality of these contacts proves that this is a very special relationship. And we should also always remember that Ukraine and Turkey are two biggest powers in the Black Sea region, which aim to keep this region safe, stable, and prosperous. I'm not taking Russia into account because Russia acts as a destabilizing factor in the Black Sea region. Though it's much bigger than both Ukraine and Turkey, but it tries to destabilize the region while Turkey and Ukraine are working together to ensure stability.
Can you give us more information about the sea rules? Because as long as I know from the news that Russia would like to have more sea land in Black Sea. Well,
Russia illegally occupied Ukrainian peninsula Crimea and turned it into basically a military base. Crimean Peninsula stands in the very middle of the Black Sea and therefore serves, unfortunately, serves as a very easy and very well located military base to undertake military operations. If Russia looks to the west of Crimea, it can interrupt trade routes connecting the port of Odessa and Turkey and further Mediterranean. If they look to the east, they block and destabilize the Sea of Azov and the fishing industry in that part. And if they look, and they also have special economic interests trying to exploit natural resources of the Black Sea. And the last element is purely security. It's military destabilization and posing military threat to Ukraine from the sea. This is what Russia is doing, and no country in the Black Sea can deter and contain Russia on its own. So we need a joint effort of Ukraine, Turkey, Romania, Bulgaria, Georgia, Together, we can create a counterbalance, a stabilizing counterbalance to destabilizing Russian activities in the Black Sea region.
Okay, what role do you think that Turkey can play in the crisis between Russia and Ukraine?
Well, it has been playing that constructive role since 2014, first by strongly supporting territorial integrity of Ukraine in all possible formats. Second, by delegating capable Turkish diplomats to work in the special monitoring mission of OSCE in Ukraine. This is the mission that observes the situation in the conflict zone in Donbass. Third, by supporting Ukrainian initiatives related to Crimea, most importantly, the Crimea platform. And fourth, by getting involved in a very deep and structured cooperation on military and defense. You know, the famous example of Bayraktar UAVs, which are very important for Ukraine, but also for Turkey. And we are aiming at doing co-production and of these UAVs. So these are the four elements how Turkey has been very important, very helpful, and very constructive in making sure that Ukraine is capable of defending itself against Russia.
You mentioned the Crimea platform. Can you please give us a little bit more details about this?
Yeah, sure. Well, first, Crimea platform is already a success because it steered discussions. It brought the issue back to the agendas of diplomats around the world. And in that sense, I'm satisfied with this because that was one of the strategic purposes of this initiative, to stop, to put an end to the process where Crimea fades away from international agenda. Now we are heading towards the summit of the Crimea platform to be held on 23rd of August, and I have no doubts that this will be a very successful summit as well. Every week we receive new confirmations of attendance from heads of government, state, parliaments, foreign ministers. Turkey will also attend, and we will launch an initiative that will bring together every international actor that cares for Crimea, that cares for international law and for security and prosperity of the Black Sea region as a whole. And they will be coordinating their efforts to ensure consistency of our policy towards the deoccupation of Crimea.
So as a part of its military modernization, you mentioned also in just a few minutes ago that Ukraine acquired 12 Bayraktar TB2S drones from Turkey in 2019. Ukraine eyes more joint defense projects with Turkey. What are the new steps in the military cooperation?
Well, when it comes to Bayraktars, our immediate objectives are to make sure that Turkish UAVs are equipped with Ukrainian engines, and that Turkish UAVs are produced in Ukraine. These are two dimensions where we work very actively, and I'm sure we will succeed, to the benefit of both Ukraine and Turkey. If Ukraine and Turkey merge their military defense potentials, if they, well, merge is probably too legally too complicated, but if we join our efforts in developing our military technologies, we can become unbeatable, because you have something that we don't have, and vice versa. So we can complement each other and take an additional part of the global military market, arms market, for the benefit of our nations and our economies. The biggest project that I want, the biggest new project that I want to see implemented is, of course, Antonov airplanes and developing air capacity of both Turkey and Ukraine. You have your interests, we have ours. We possess technologies which, again, if put together, can produce excellent results, not for strengthening defense of our countries, but also for strengthening positions on our global market, on the global market. And this is a very complicated project, but there is a political will from both sides to jump on it and to get it done.
Last week, President Putin and United States President Biden met in Geneva to discuss the issues, and Ukraine was on the top of the agenda. And for example, Ukraine has been trying to join the NATO for 15 years by obtaining the membership action plan. And at the NATO summit, for example, Ukraine membership to NATO was also discussed. Will concrete steps be taken from the membership, and what's your thoughts about this Putin and Biden meeting?
Ukraine will certainly be making steps to obtain membership in NATO. And we deeply appreciate a very resolute support of Turkey to these efforts. What remains to be seen is whether the alliance will be taking steps to make Ukraine accede to NATO. Our concern is that for 13 years, since Bucharest summit, where membership was promised, nothing has been done to implement that decision by the NATO side. So what we lack at this point is not the assurance that we will become members of NATO. I think this is obvious, and this is a kind of an established fact for both Kiev and Brussels. It's the timeline. NATO cannot provide us with even the most general, even the outline of the timeline. So that complicates the process, because you understand where you are heading to, but when you do not understand when, even approximately, what is the estimated time of your arrival, that complicates things politically. And the people of Ukraine deserve to know that timeline. It's not even about politicians. It's about the people of Ukraine. They should be assured that their struggle, their commitment, and their will to build, to become part of the Euro-Atlantic space is appreciated. When it comes to the meeting between Presidents Biden and Putin, I think it went exactly as we expected. No, it was a very open conversation, no breakthrough, no big decisions, not a single decision on Ukraine. In fact, we appreciate that the United States stuck to the word, to their promise that they gave to us, that they will never be making deals on Ukraine without Ukraine. And this is, they kept their word. I was, on the very next day after the summit, I received a debrief from the State Department about the content of the discussion, and I see nothing that could make me worry. In fact, what I like about this summit is that the United States were very firm when it came to Ukraine, and they are ready to continue their engagement. Because the peace process with Russia, between Ukraine and Russia, requires an additional driving force. And the United States can certainly play that role. And they seem to be willing to play that role.
And obviously, Russia is one of the countries close to Ukraine in terms of border, in terms of a little bit of the culture as well. Is there any discussion between Putin and Zelensky as well about how to come to the ceasefire, how to make the ceasefire for future?
My president officially proposed a meeting, a summit with Putin. Unfortunately, we do not see a lot of appetite in Moscow for that meeting, but we are trying our best, and we want this meeting to be held because we all understand one thing. If you want to make a deal with Russia, you have to speak with Putin directly. There is no one else who can make a decision, who can assume responsibility. And we do want decisions because it is our land, it's our people, and we want to bring peace to Ukraine and to see Russian army withdrawing from Ukraine and taking its proxies with them. And to achieve that, we of course need to talk to Putin. And I can reiterate the readiness of President Zelensky to hold such summit.
So why Ukraine's potential entry to NATO makes Russia vulnerable? Do you see this as a threat?
Well, Ukraine's independence makes Russia vulnerable. Everything that relates to Ukraine is taken with a lot of emotions in Moscow. In fact, if we go back in history to early 90s, we will see that after the split up of the socialist bloc in Europe, Russia always followed the same line when it came to NATO enlargement. They were saying that you should not expand to Central European countries, because if NATO gets those countries on board, that will be the red line, and that will mean the end of security. Well, Central European countries became members of NATO, and the sky did not fall on Earth. Then the Russians said the same about Baltic countries. No enlargement of NATO in the Baltics. This is the red line. Baltic countries became members of NATO, and the sky did not fall on Earth. So it's politics, and the same Ukraine undergoes through the same process. We understand that, but I want to point out one element of Russian hypocrisy. When President Putin started speaking about the military threat of Ukraine as member of NATO, that Russia will have to kind of handle. He said that it's impossible to imagine that NATO will be on the borders of Russia, and that the time that the missile will fly from Ukraine to Russia will be too short. I would like to remind that Russia already borders NATO. Estonia and Russia, they have direct border, and the NATO country is not far away from St. Petersburg, the second most important city in Russia, and nothing happened. You know, they coexist peacefully. So I'm sure that in the end, when we sort out all these political struggles and emotions of Russia, we will coexist peacefully. Because we want to become members of NATO, not to attack Russia, but to be able to better defend ourselves from Russia. And this is the point.
How do you evaluate the EU's soft policy with Russia? What do you think EU should be a little bit tough in terms of its policies towards Russia?
Yes, the European Union can and should be more tough towards Russia. However, we understand that EU consists of 27 countries, and some of them enjoy special relationship and have special bonds with Russia. So it's difficult for the EU to reach consensus on that. At the same time, EU should be credited for one very simple achievement. Before Russian aggression against Ukraine in 2014, EU had no common policy on Russia at all. This policy was in the hands of each and every capital. Now that common policy exists, it's a reasonable policy based on a very clear understanding that Russia poses a threat. And this creates the framework, the institutional framework, for making that policy tougher. And I'm sure that if Russia continues its malign behavior and its destructive behavior against Ukraine or against EU members, the European Union will have no other choice but to tighten up its policy on Russia.
Also, can you give us a little bit update on the Donbas region? What is the recent situation there?
In the beginning of spring, Russia began concentrating additional military forces along our border in the occupied territories, in Crimea, in both Crimea and Donbas. That escalation was unprecedented since 2014 and 15 and put the entire democratic world on alert. Ukraine achieved a very important result. Unlike in 2014, we quickly mobilized international support, and Russia saw that this will not be an easy ride for them. So in the end of April, Minister of Defense of Russia announced that this concentration, this escalation was just a military exercise that achieved its purposes, and they begin the withdrawal of forces. That was the end of April. Now, we are sitting here in the mid of June, and I can tell you that out of 100-something thousand troops concentrated on the border with Ukraine in the end of April, Russia has withdrawn around 12,000 troops by now, which is nothing. It's peanuts. It's around 10% of the entire force, which means that Russia is still there, and they are capable of escalating at any given moment. It's a threat, but we know that the international community follows closely this case, and it is ready to help Ukraine first to prevent Russia from escalating, but if Russia does not listen to these calls, then to help Ukraine defend itself. And of course, Donbas is the place where it can all begin, because this is an open wound on the body of Ukraine. And on the one hand, no big war is taking place there. But every week we lose a soldier shot by a sniper or killed by a shell. We have wounded. So the war is there. There are no big battles, but soldiers get killed. And Donbas remains the place where the big battle can begin at any given moment.
We hope that it's not going to escalate too much then. Okay, let's come back to Turkey. My last question will be that Turkey and Ukraine want to increase the trade volume with 10 billion. In this regard, what would you say about the relationship? Is there a trade agreement in the future as well?
We are one step away from concluding the free trade agreement, but it will be the most difficult step to make, because we approached the most sensitive parts of our trade. Those trade positions which constitute great importance for the economy of Ukraine and Turkey, and where both our countries feel the highest level of sensitivity, you know. But the political will to have this agreement done is present in both Kyiv and Ankara. Our trade experts are ready to come to Turkey and to make an effort to overcome this difficulty. To achieve the result, we both have to make concessions, both Kyiv and Ankara. And the art of trade diplomacy is to strike the balance where both sides make reasonable concessions in order to achieve balanced result. So this is the task for our trade diplomats, and they were instructed by the foreign ministries and by the leaders of our countries, President Erdogan and President Zelensky, to finally strike that balance. Because the free trade agreement between Ukraine and Turkey will make both our countries stronger and will create added value for stability and prosperity of the Black Sea region.
Thank you very much for your time and your participation. We really enjoyed, and it was an honor to have you in our program.
The pleasure was all mine.